aconchego da areia, ele dorme a noite inteira, não há o que duvidar, ali é seu lugar. Eu não te impeço de chorar, pode perguntar. Tudo certo da correnteza aos pinguins na natureza, até a paciência que vem tão devagar.
This is one of the Southern Hemisphere's most visited cities, not just because of its physical beauty, but because it is the cradle of Portuguese Brazilian culture, the home of samba and the bossa nova, and of course, carnival. The Portuguese first encountered this incredible bay and the river leading inland from it on January 1st, 1502, which explains why the city came to be known as Rio de Janeiro, or January River. The timing of its discovery is connected with Rio's image as a great party city. Here in Copacabana, each year, they still throw the world's biggest New Year's Eve party, with 2 million people gathering on this beach to watch one of the world's great fireworks displays. Even as you move away from the water, there's a tropical nature to this town that's quite amazing. I'm here in the Lapa neighborhood near downtown Rio. This is an artsy neighborhood, as you can see. There's one draw here that's among the more eccentric as well as beloved pieces of public art, courtesy of a Chilean artist, Jorge Celaran, who began in the 1990s to use colorful tiles, decorating steps here. There are 220 of the steps, and he made it until his death in 2013. At first, he was made fun of by people in the neighborhood who thought he was a little crazy. After they saw what he was doing, he had no trouble collecting the materials for his work. He had scrounged around to find tiles wherever he could find them for years. But that tide turned, and people literally from all over the world subsequently donated tiles. Well-known entertainers from around the world have used these steps as a backdrop for music videos, and the corporate world has used these steps commercially, all because of one man's vision.
Everybody say, I love Brazil! I love Brazil! Perfect!
Well, I like to start the day with a nice breakfast, and I certainly have a nice breakfast, which includes scrambled eggs and a papaya, some bread, ham and cheese, some Brazilian toast, a tall glass of orange juice, and a cup of coffee. This breakfast cost nearly $13. Rio is not cheap, especially the closer you get toward the beach, here in Copacabana or in Ipanema. Well, having had that breakfast, I'm now setting off to see some of the leading sights of this city, and especially two of them that I know many of you will be familiar with. I'm about to take one of the world's most famous cable car rides to the summit of Sugarloaf Mountain, the peak at the mouth of Guanabara Bay on a peninsula that juts out into the Atlantic Ocean. Swaying back and forth just a bit, but a very smooth ride. It's very easy to be overwhelmed by the scenic views from this place until you realize that we're barely halfway up to the altitude or the elevation we will be at the top of Sugarloaf. Well, this hill motto is many things, including a rock climbing spot for those who are attracted by the sport. And it's hard to imagine a more aesthetic place to rock climb. And these sheer cliffs with this splendid bay behind it. Sugarloaf Mountain, and of course looking out over the skyline of the North Zone with Dumont Airport on that peninsula in the middle of it. Quite a spectacular place. So we're on the final cable car, and I'm told that this trip will take almost precisely 1 minute and 30 seconds to the top. Well, I guess as with any cable car, failure is not an option.
Find the gap between the cable car and the bus. Cuidado con el espacio entre el cementerio y la carretera. Mind the gap between the cable car and the bus. Cola.
This is nice.
Very nice 90-second ride to the top. Well, I've come across town from Sugarloaf to the Christ the Redeemer statue, the other iconic image of Rio de Janeiro. And to get here, a van that climbed a tall hill, a switch to a shuttle to bring us to an elevator of 6 or 8 stories. And then, as you may have just noticed, I've gotten off the first of at least 2 sets of escalators, which will get us to the base of the statue, which is 30 meters tall, just under 100 feet, and it sits on an 8-meter tall base. And of course, on the top of a very narrow crag that's spectacular in itself, the Copacabana Hill, overlooking Rio. And if we're not in the clouds completely in a moment, I'll show you the view. There are few statues in the world that are as well known as Christ the Redeemer. He was built between 1922 and 1931 and has really become synonymous with Rio. There's hardly a place in the city where you can't see this statue with its outstretched arms peering down from this narrow mountaintop, some 2,300 feet above the city. Tijuca National Park, the huge forest at the foot of Sugarloaf Mountain, is an incredible ecological renewal project that began in the 1860s. Along with a park in Johannesburg, South Africa, it claims to be the world's largest urban forest, over 15 square miles in size. On the dark side, the forest was replanted by slaves between 1861 and 1887. They planted 100,000 trees during that time span. And the forest still has a favela, or a slum, which is said to have been started by descendants of those slaves. Of all of the throngs of people here, crowded in cheek by jowl, their focus is not really on the statue. It can't be, really, because the statue is not in anyone's sight line without looking up. And you can see it fine, but the real reason for coming up here is, of course, the view of the city. The shame of the moment is that it's largely covered in clouds. But you can still appreciate just how dramatic a setting this is, despite the clouds. Maybe even because of them, the way they're blowing around here, changing by the moment. At other times when the skies are clear, you can really see 360-degree view of this beautiful city. So it's well worth making the trek here. I would say, if possible, check the weather forecast first. Well, I've come to a very special place at the north end of Copacabana Beach. And this is an ecological reserve that's under the guise of a military fort. This is the historic Fort Lemme, and named after the hill upon which it sits. It also has been called other things, including Fort Duque de Cavache. It is, as I say, an ecological preserve that owes its existence to the fact that this is a historic fort. In the 1980s, it was decided to transition the real purpose of this fort without removing it from military control. And much of the rainforest that had vanished around it has been preserved. This hill, rising up at a point within the fort, offers panoramic views. A place to appreciate not only the nature that is here, but the fantastic views of the ocean and the beaches at the top. Well, that says that strange little creature is a Pico Estrella, and its scientific name looks more like a medicinal drug than an animal, but Nonetheless, I've never seen anything like that, and I would love to see one on this hike. Who knows? Maybe we will. I think I see it. It's like a cross between a squirrel and a raccoon. It leaped out from the side of the road onto a tree limb like a monkey. 3 leaps and he's on 3 trees. And it happened within a couple of minutes after I saw the sign. How cool is that? In a sense, this fort is more famous for what didn't happen here than for what did. And I'm referring to World War II. Brazil didn't have radar or sonar at the time. And in 1943, when a watchman sounded the alarm that there were German submarines in the bay, the fort responded with gunfire against the intruders. The intruders turned out to be gray whales, whom we're told managed to get away unharmed.
Hello, Brett. How are you? Good night.